One Piece film Shanks has been confirmed. So let's do that thing I do and talk about it. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and this room is far too blue. We need some red. Give me some red. Red accomplished. But today we are about to go through everything we know about One Piece film Red, a project that was sprung on us very, very suddenly, with Eiichiro Oda serving as the producer as well as credited with creating an original story, with a release date set for August 6, 2022. So what do we know about it? Well, before we get into that, what we do know is that Miss Joke, Bean Boy, and One Subman have all done an amazing thing, which was to press the subscribe button for the Grand Line Review, which will result in consistent injections of One Piece culture being administered directly into their YouTube feeds. And if you'd like to be our next subscriber of the day, then hit the button and please do say hi in the comments below if you are a new member of the Grand Fleet, or an old member, we do both. Welcome. So of course, along with this announcement came a message from Oda, which read as follows. The word red kind of being a pun in this case, actually. We're making a movie. Red. I'm tired of drawing legendary old men in movies, lol. Let me draw a girl. This is the character we wanted to create now. That's how it started. Did you know that the great director Goro Taniguchi, who now seems like he is making something totally different from One Piece, was actually the first person in the world to make Luffy into an anime? Now, we have a lot of surprises in store for you. The new movie Red. Please let your fantasy fuel your imagination while you look forward to it. Oda they're essentially giving people like me on the internet permission to speculate endlessly on the very little information we know, so we're going to do exactly that. And along with this announcement, a short teaser trailer was also released, confirming our grand suspicions that this film is going to be heavily related to a certain Mr. Shanks, which I think is a fantastic idea. The One Piece movies have been in a weird spot since Strong World because every film now needs to top the previous one, and that's particularly difficult to do in the case of film Red, because our previous installment was One Piece Stampede, which honestly to this day I maintain is much more of an event than it was a film, mostly because it had next to no story and ended up being one gigantic action spectacle of Douglas Bullet versus the One Piece universe. Which might sound like a harsh critique, but it really isn't. At least Stampede tried to break the classic One Piece movie formula and do its own thing. Not everything needs a solid story to deliver, and to me One Piece Stampede is more akin to watching the grand finals of, insert sporting match of your choice, one of the ones with the balls. But how do you follow up a movie that featured half of the One Piece universe? Well, there aren't many options. One idea that was popularized as part of an April Fool's gag was to have something like One Piece Film Rocks, where we explore Rocksteady Zebek's rise to power and the God Valley incident as part of the film, with all sorts of fun appearances from Roger and Garp and stuff. And what we've ended up with is something along those lines, just with a different legendary figure. And I personally never would have predicted a Shanks-centric film, primarily because he still has yet to do a whole lot in the series itself. Now with that said, there are three key takeaways from the information we have right now, one of which brings the Shanks focus into question, which is the image of this presumably young lady, and this is the person that Oda is referring to in his message, where he says he's sick of drawing old men. And to be fair, a lot of our film antagonists have been pushing that age barrier, and in fact our youngest antagonist of the modern era was Guild Tesoro, who is 41, which compared to Luffy is practically a geriatric. But the reason why I bring them up is because I'm seeing a lot of speculation on the internet that this lady is going to be our protagonist rather than Shanks, and that could very well be true, maybe, but the way that Oda talks about wanting to subvert his legendary old men trope leads me to lean in the direction of this lady being the antagonist, as well as the few bits of dialogue in the teaser trailer describing her, which is, will her voice bring forth eternal happiness or endless imprisonment? That latter one there sounding like a pretty bad thing to me. But a very nifty detail on our lady friend here would be their wings. Protagonist, antagonist, or supporting cast member, it looks like she is a sky person, and I find that very exciting because the movies very rarely feature prominent characters who aren't stock standard humans. And I think that's really kind of a shame because One Piece is so rich with fishmen, giant sky people, and so on and so forth, that it really limits the world when we narrow our focus to strictly human business. Now, as for what kind of sky person she is, we can also make a fairly educated guess regarding that. There are 3 sky tribes, each with their own distinctive wing shapes, and currently film Red Girl, who actually comes to think of it, needs a name. So I asked you to name her for me. And I decided this time around to go with the very first comment, so until further notice, Red Girl's name is Liam. Except we're not going to call her Liam, so we'll go with the second comment, meaning that Red Girl's name is now Red Girl. You guys need to get a bit more creative with the names. In any case, Red Girl's wings most strongly resemble the Birkin wings. Birka being the island that Enel destroyed and the former home of the great Gedatsu, among others. Others who are not Gedatsu and therefore much less important. And I suppose at this stage we also shouldn't rule out King's race entirely, but it does look very unlikely because his wings are quite black, whilst Red Girl's wings are currently depicted as being very, very light. In addition to that, we also know that she's some kind of performer, and that this film, or at the very least Red Girl's character, has a very musical motif, because the teaser trailer contains all sorts of funky sheet music, which is very interesting because performance isn't something that we often get to focus on in One Piece. I mean, we have the odd character here and there like Brook or Scratchman Apu who are very musically inclined, and I guess Tezora had a pretty big entertainment thing going on, but I'm very interested to see the path that we are taking with Red Girl and how she connects to Shanks, because that is our next big takeaway. This film right now is being sold on Shanks, and when I say that, I mean that his scar is in the logo. Just look at the scars on that D, which sounds rather painful actually. But initially my hope is that this would be a movie where we get to have an adventure with Shanks and the Red Hair Pirates at some stage prior to when he became an Emperor of the Sea, and maybe given how centrally focused the scar seems to be, let us in on that conflict with Blackbeard. But that latter part becomes very questionable, because then we're talking about revealing canon material within a movie, which is not at all unheard of. In fact, most films do feature canon or impact the canon to a very small degree. For example, in Strong World we introduce Shiki, who is a real character, just the events of Strong World itself never happened. Meanwhile, Film Z revealed the post-time skip designs of a whole ton of Marines, although I don't think Film Gold did anything weird with canon. Maybe it did and I'm just forgetting. But Stampede certainly did, because that film revealed to us for the first time that Raftel is actually called Laugh-Tale, which was massive. So I would expect something very similar with Film Red, a sprinkle of canon mostly within an alternate universe kind of story. However, my big question is, as much as I'd personally love a film focusing on just Shanks and his adventures, is it actually possible to make a One Piece film without having Luffy at the helm? And obviously it is possible. I suppose a better question is, if you were the groups funding this film, would you take that risk? And I'm not sure if they would. Animated films are very expensive, and if I was some sort of fancy producer, look, I might feel a bit uncomfortable trying to sell a One Piece movie without a Luffy. Because as much as Harder and Korra fans like me, or people who watch me on the internet like you, as much as we might eat that right up straight out of the box without any milk, a more casual audience might be less forgiving. Which leads us into our next scenario for what this film could be. Instead of something focusing on Shanks, it could simply be another Straw Hat adventure where they run into a character, aka the Red Girl, who has some sort of intrinsic connection to Shanks, and we get various flashbacks of him and stuff like that. At the same time though, I think that would be a big kick in the hype balls after dropping a teaser trailer like this promising Shanks. In fact, right now the movie doesn't actually promise anything else. They are selling the movie based on Shanks and Shanks alone. I mean, there is Red Girl, but I'm sorry Red Girl, I'm sure you'll be important and stuff, but you are not the ticket seller of this here trailer. So it's really tricky actually, because either it's a very Shanks-centric film, and we're going to be getting to know him a lot better than we have in the actual series, or it's a Straw Hat adventure with more of the spirit of Shanks in the background kind of vibe. The reason why it probably can't be a mixture of both is because it's just not possible for Luffy and Shanks to meet. Given that's one of the most highly anticipated moments of One Piece as a whole, I don't think that something like that would happen in a film. To other details though, Oda mentioned that this film was being directed by Goro Taniguchi, a name which probably doesn't mean much to many of us, myself included, but he's most well known for being the backbone of Code Geass as the director, and he's also credited with the original story. But fun fact, he was the very first person to bring One Piece to life, because he also directed the 1998 OVA, One Piece: Defeat the Pirate Ganzak, which is a super weird project in retrospect because it did come before the 1999 anime, and so it used a different art style, voice cast, and it's just, wow, it's so different. But if you ever do feel the need to watch it, just be aware that it almost feels like a knockoff of One Piece in retrospect. But it is interesting that Goro Taniguchi has a history with the series, although I'm not excited by his name and his background alone. I mean, Code Geass was great and all, but it's hard to judge how well this will turn out based on that alone. And something else we should also discuss is the release date. And I say that sounding kind of defeated because as Western One Piece fans, I'm sure that we're all very much used to having movie blue balls, because they tend to come out in Japan and then it can take anywhere between 4 to 8 months for them to appear elsewhere in the world. So while the film will be playing in Japanese theaters on the 6th of August, that is not a guarantee for everywhere else on this planet. And something else that does make me a little bit extra skeptical is that if you take a look at the Japanese poster, it has the film's release date on it. But if you look at the English poster, then it just says coming soon, which doesn't really instill me with a lot of confidence. But according to a certain YouTuber who is a bit more connected with the production side of things than I am, allegedly Funimation are aiming for a simultaneous release with Japan. So that is potentially great news for Americans, which most Grand Fleet members are, although it's a lot less great for us who live elsewhere like Europe, Australia, India, and all of the other countries you guys are from. So what I will say is that if you live in some sort of non-American location, find out who distributes the One Piece films in your non-American location, and then email them relentlessly with requests for Film Red. For any other Australians watching, I believe that would be Madman. Oh, and something else I should also note is that Oda is credited with the original story, however that does not make him the writer. The screenplay is being written by Tsutomu Kuroiwa, who also did the screenplay for One Piece Film Gold. And Film Gold was fun, so I think I feel pretty alright about this. How I feel is irrelevant though, because I want to know how you feel. What is it that you want from One Piece Film Red? Well, as with many other things, I asked all of you, and the most upvoted answer was, I want to see a movie that's canon for once. And what I will say is that Digby and friends of Digby, just be careful what you wish for. Because if this is a canon film and it doesn't have a simultaneous global release, then you are almost certainly going to get spoiled in the ensuing months waiting for it to be released in your region, if it is ever released in your region at all. I'd love a canon film as well, but I would feel really bad for the people living in awkward places in the world who wouldn't get to see it until it was released on DVD or something. Although I've also seen people compare the idea of a canon film to that of Demon Slayer Mugen Train. But the difference between that and Film Red is that Mugen Train was a direct manga to movie adaptation. Even if your region didn't get the Demon Slayer film, you could easily just go and read the manga to get the story. But that is not going to happen with Film Red because, well, there is no manga to go to. Regardless, anything to do with Shanks is hype as crap, and I cannot wait to learn more about One Piece Film Red. But in the meantime, you can learn more about something else with this next video, because there's always more to examine, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.